one hopes that they come to it with a sort of fresh palette, so to speak. So there's not too many sort of preconceived ideas. No, they're bonkers, aren't they?
They are bonkers.
They're absolutely mad, the Targaryens. They're a right old bunch.
And emotional. They're so emotional.
Yeah.
And they can't talk to each other.
They're quite a cross family, deep down.
They are.
I think they need a great deal of therapy.
They
frankly.
do. They do.
Group therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Family therapy.
Family therapy.
I think there are like two main things that make Rhaenyra a character who interests me, at least. She is both female and never expects to be heir. That's never on the table. And everything falls apart the moment that she receives the inheritance that everyone looks for. And the other thing is she's someone who I think is at odds with her gender as a result of the position she finds herself in. Yeah, I suppose I'm interested in like all gender questions. So yeah, you have someone whose womanhood is at odds with the role that they've been awarded.
I think they can find out what they want to find out on the internet about Daemon Targaryen. It's there for all to see, and it's just my take on it, really. He's a slightly sort of different creature to most of them, I think.
Alicent starts off as Rhaenyra's best friend and daughter to the hand of the king, and she is quite an anxious rule follower in comparison to how free and mischievous Rhaenyra is.
I play Otto Hightower, Alicent's father. He's the hand of the king. He's an astute, high-functioning political creature, but he struggles with some of the decisions he is forced to make.
So Rhaenys technically is in line to the throne when the time comes for the old king to pass on, and because she is a woman, she is outvoted by 20-1 by those fools in charge at the time.
I play Lord Corlys Velaryon, who is the head of the Velaryon house, which is he would say the oldest house in Westeros. That his family came to Westeros before the Targaryens. Lord Corlys is the only one who doesn't ride a dragon. His whole family do. He's married to a dragon rider, and his children are dragon riders. Obviously, that involves an awful lot of influence and power, but of course, he'd like more power.
Game of Thrones, the world was so big, and you were outside of King's Landing and outside of the sort of central focus of the main family a lot, whereas this is a bit more sort of insular, I think, and there are more dragons in it, for one thing.
I mean, I think one of the things that maybe feels different in a delicious way is that a lot of this series is quite domestic, almost kitchen sinky in places, in that it's sort of largely about interrelationships and really complex families.
Ultimately, the core of both of these shows is the pursuit of power. I think the difference with this show is that it's slightly more intimate. Politics and politicking play a greater role, I think, in this.
Here we are only at the start. It feels like this is really intense and more focusing with this one crazy family.
It's about dragons. Well, there's lots of dragons in it. When we're sort of filming the dragons on set, we have this big buck, which is a bit like a bucking bronco, and it moves around and it's mechanical, and they, fire loads of wind in your face, and then they add our big, beautiful dragons on top of that in post-production.
So I was quite cross, I think, when I had to go and do my buck work, just by chance. And
just because you were that morning
I just
cross?
Was, yeah, and
Oh,
I didn't fancy it maybe, and then it turns out it's sort of irresistible. It's like going to IKEA and having to try the taps in the kitchens.
Yeah, it's really windy as well. The wind's quite exciting, isn't it?
It is. It's like when you stick your head out of the car and you can't catch your breath.
Yes.
Giddy making.
Rhaenys' dragon is called Meleys, and they are very, very close. Almost like Meleys is a part of Rhaenys, and Rhaenys is a part of Meleys. They're very, very attached.
I think kind of Daemon and Caraxes are sort of one entity, really. They're one spirits, they're sort of avatars of one another. They're both just grumpy and moody. So I do think there's a kind of weird, symbiotic, sort of molecular thing that goes on.
Oh my God, the wigs! It's a number to get into them and then get out of them.
I'm lucky. I'm one of the few characters that doesn't wear a wig.
Although you did say this morning you wish you did have one.
I did. I wanted this morning. I wanted to wear a wig because it means you get to spend more time in makeup, you know, chatting. And I'm always a happier man when I leave the makeup trailer than when I enter it. You know, it's a good way to start your day.
I love wearing a wig, it turns out, which...
Do you?
I do, actually.
It does suit you.
It's just so transformative. It's an air look. Like, I arrive at work, I don't have to come as the person.
Yeah, or
and
it's
then I have
like
an hour
purgatory,
in, like...
whichever way you look at it, it's
Right.
one of the... No, it's not.
Okay,
It
Matt's
is-
in purgatory.
No, I'm not only joking.
I'm in a
I know what
crucible
you
of
mean, though.
transformation.
Yes, and I'm in purgatory. No, but it sort of does a lot of the work for you, doesn't it?
It does, it changes...
It's like a mask.
It does, yeah, right.
Yeah.
It changes sort of everything.
It does, yeah.
I, in a couple of eps, have a weave to make my hair longer, but it's all your hair, it's all my hair. I think on the other side, on the Targ side,
Yeah,
it's...
but your wig isn't my hair.
Yeah, my wig is your hair. And then you've got all the, you know, the battle scenes and where the wigs get destroyed from all the blood and the gunk that's being flown around, and, you know, you can just see the despair from the hair and makeup team.
The members of the cast received a signed copy of George R.R. Martin's Fire and Blood. I read a bit. I did. I did.
What we did was, well, what I did anyway, was skim to the parts of the book, because it's a huge book. And I started to skim that, and then I thought, actually, no, if it's not in the script, it's not there. I don't need it. So I'll probably read it this summer.
I was very aware of it because, you know, it was very difficult not to be aware of it, but I hadn't actually seen it.
I hadn't watched the series before I auditioned. But then once I got the job and started watching Game of Thrones, I realised that I had been auditioning with Cersei's scenes. But I was so happy I hadn't watched it, because I would have just mimicked absolutely everything that she had done. But, you know, people are going to compare regardless to kings and queens and various other archetypes within the show.
My method has been to not think about it, and I've got very good at repression.
It's been such a healthy shoot, hasn't it?
No, but it's worked so well for me. I would really recommend it to, honestly, anyone else. Just don't think about it,
Just
and it
repress
ceases to be an
everything.
issue.
Yeah.
No, I am aware that at some point it's going to come up, but for
Nothing
now...
we can do, though.
No.
Nothing we can do, and, you know, that show was its own entity. It was a cultural phenomenon in many ways, and it was its own independent thing, and this is a new independent thing. And it's a different story with different actors, with sort of different people making it, with the same ambitions, but it will be different.
Yeah, if we try to go in and make Game of Thrones Mark II, I think everyone will be very horribly disappointed. I also think you couldn't make Game of Thrones now. I think we're in a different climate, it's a different time.
Based on the bit that I've read from that book, I think what Ryan and Miguel have done, and all the writers and so forth, is they've created a credible tale from beginning to end that is consistent. Of course, there will be those fanboys and girls who will watch it and not be happy and say, well, this should have been that and this should have been that. I've had a bit of that, but you can't please everybody.
I think possibly for the producers and the creators, there's a pressure, which is, you know, understandable, you know, and palpable. But for us as actors, it's like any other job. You know, you go in and you do the work, and you do it to the best of your abilities.
And completely forget that it's ever going to be seen on screens.
But obviously, the way we're telling it is the bit we'd like to keep secret, and the sort of the elements of it, the bits of the story that we're focusing on, and the characters' perspective, because that's what's sort of different from the book, isn't it? It's the perspective of our show is slightly different.
I mean, there's a really lovely thing, right, in terms of any relationship between this show and Game of Thrones in the future is, I think, some of the kind of historic events that we hear about in Thrones, maybe a record gets set straight in House of the Dragon.